In this video, we're going to be comparing two relatively popular broadcast dynamic microphones. We've got the Rode Podmic and the Shure SM7b. You'll often see people on YouTube talking up the Podmic and talking about what a great value it is because you can literally get 4 Podmics for the price of one Shure SM7b. So the value proposition is pretty compelling, and I don't deny that in any way, shape, or form. I just wanted to give you a very direct head-to-head comparison between these two microphones so you can decide, is it worth saving the money and getting a Podmic or maybe multiple Podmics if you do want to start a podcast with multiple guests? Or should you go ahead and save up some more money, take some more time, and just get the SM7b? Will you be happier in the long run if you get that microphone? So in this video, just to talk about the setup a little bit here, I'm recording both microphones into the Rodecaster Pro. I'm actually recording onto micro SD card using the multi-track function. And currently, I am not using any Mic Activator, Cloudlifter, anything like that with either microphone. So you're hearing them just with the raw microphone using the internal preamps of the Rodecaster Pro to give you an idea of what they sound like and if you can actually utilize this setup without getting any additional equipment. So no processing is currently enabled on the Rodecaster Pro. So it's just the raw signal, and both are in the generic dynamic microphone setting. As far as gain is concerned, for the SM7b, I have the gain set to 53 dB. So that's just too shy of the maximum amount of gain that the Rodecaster Pro can provide. And then I've got the fader to the just under the third notch from the top. As for the Podmic, I have the gain set to 49, so it's a little bit lower. What did I say, 53? So 4 dB lower than the SM7b. And the fader set to the same position as the SM7b. And I'm trying to stay pretty much in the same position for both microphones. I might actually be favoring the SM7b a little bit. I'm trying. I'm doing my best. But I'm about a fist's distance between both microphones. I'm trying to talk pretty much in between them, so hopefully it's going to be fair. So we'll do a handful of tests, so go ahead and check the timestamps. If you want to jump around to different parts of the video, we're going to test the proximity effect with both microphones, test how they sound from maybe a foot away. You definitely don't want to get more than a foot away from microphones like these. We'll test the off-axis rejection and also how it sounds, your voice sounds from different angles coming into the microphone. And we'll do a plosive comparison and then also a handling comparison so you can see or hear how the mics sound if you bump them or bump the stand or touch your desk, all those kinds of things that you might accidentally do when recording whatever content that you're recording. I'm also going to plug in both microphones to a Cloudlifter CL1 so you can hear the difference, how much of a difference it makes to incorporate a mic activator with both of these microphones. In my opinion, especially for the SM7b, it's totally worth it, if not completely necessary, to get something like a Cloudlifter. And I've done a video comparing the Cloudlifter, which is usually $150, to something much cheaper like the Technic CL1, which you can get for $30. So if you want to hear the differences between those types of things, maybe check out that video, which I think is here. I'll also have my wife record a little bit of dialogue so you can hear how both of these microphones sound on her voice. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the test, starting with the proximity effect. And we'll go ahead and start with the Podmic. So as I get a little bit closer, I'm going to turn the fader down, turn the volume down a little bit. So now I'm about an inch and a half away from the front of the Podmic, and this is how it sounds. The proximity effect with the Podmic. Does it sound good? Does it sound nice? Does it increase the bass too much, or do you like it? Do you hate it? You tell me. And now moving on to the Shure SM7b, tickling the front of the windscreen with my mouth, and I feel like with the way this microphone is built, you can get a little bit closer to it because the actual mic capsule is a little bit further down on this massive windscreen. So this is the proximity effect with the Shure SM7b. So now here I am about a foot away from both microphones, starting with the Rode Podmic. This is what it sounds like when you are a very scientific measurement, about 3 fists, 3.5 maybe, from the front of the Rode Podmic. So now talking into the Shure SM7b from the same distance, we're probably about a foot away from the front of the microphone. And this is how it sounds about a foot away from the Shure SM7b. Okay, so now let's test the off-axis rejection of both microphones and also how it changes the tone and the quality of your voice if you're talking to it off-axis. So starting with the Podmic. Okay, so this is me talking into the front of the Rode Podmic from about the same distance as we started. And as I rotate it around, you can hear the difference in not only the level of the volume of my voice, but also the tone, the different frequencies that it's picking up and rejecting or emphasizing as you rotate the microphone around. So now this is the back of the Rode Podmic. How much of my voice is it picking up? Keep rotating it around to the other side, and this is what it sounds like talking into this side of the Rode Podmic. And now we'll just come back around to the front of the Rode Podmic. So to do the same for the Shure SM7b, this is talking into the front of it, and as I rotate it around to one side, this is what it sounds like talking into this side of the Shure SM7b. We'll rotate around to the back of the Shure SM7b. Here we go, talking into the back of it. How does that sound? Probably not too good. Coming around to the other side of the SM7b, and this is what it sounds like talking into the other side of the SM7b. And we'll just come back around to the front of the SM7b. There you go, off-axis rejection, and I don't want to take the word coloration because that's what Podcastage says, and he's much better at this than me, and I don't want to be copying him, but I'm kind of copying him. Okay, let's move on. Next, let's do a plosive comparison with both microphones, starting with the Rode Podmic. Peter Parker popped some popcorn and talked into the Podmic. Peter Parker popped some popcorn and podmic'd. And now for the SM7b, Peter Parker popped some popcorn and podmic'd. Peter Parker popped some popcorn and he podmic'd. I don't know. Seemed like a good idea in my head. How do they respond to bumping the microphone, bumping the stand, those kinds of things? So starting with the Podmic, this is me just tapping on the desk close to the stand. This is me tapping on the stand, on the base of the stand, and now tapping on the stem of the stand. And now this is me tapping on the body of the microphone. Again, this is what it sounds like if you hit the Podmic. Now, let's move on to the SM7b, and I don't have exactly the same type of stand, so we'll just do our best here. This is tapping on the base of the stand, tapping on the stem of the stand, now tapping on the boom part of the stand, and now we are tapping on the actual microphone, the base of the microphone. Which one rejects noise better? All right, next I'm going to plug both microphones into the Cloudlifter to give you a better idea of how they can sound when you can turn the gain way down in your audio interface. Between Page and Screen is a book of poetry that explores the place of books as objects in an era of increasingly screen-based reading. Its pages contain no text, only black and white geometric shapes, and directions to visit betweenpageandscreen.com. At the site, the reader confronts her mirror image thanks to a webcam, and when the book is opened, the text springs to life, appearing to leap off the page. These poems, a series of letters between P and S, two lovers struggling to define their relationship, draw on the etymologies of page and screen to explore their intersections and divergences. The words do not exist on either platform, but in the augmented space between them opened up by the reader. Between Page and Screen is a book of poetry that explores the place of books as objects in an era of increasingly screen-based reading. Its pages contain no text, only black and white geometric shapes, and directions to visit betweenpageandscreen.com. At the site, the reader confronts her mirror image thanks to a webcam, and when the book is opened, the text springs to life, appearing to leap off the page. These poems, a series of letters between P and S, two lovers struggling to define their relationship, draw on the etymologies of page and screen to explore their intersections and divergences. The words do not exist on either platform, but in the augmented space between them opened up by the reader.
Between Page and Screen is a book of poetry that explores the place of books as objects in an era of increasingly screen-based reading. Its pages contain no text, only black and white geometric shapes and directions to visit betweenpageandscreen.com. At the site, the reader confronts her mirror image thanks to a webcam, and when the book is opened, the text springs to life, appearing to leap off the page. These poems, a series of letters between P and S, two lovers struggling to define their relationship, draw on the etymologies of page and screen to explore their intersections and divergences. The words do not exist on either platform, but in the augmented space between them opened up by the reader. Between Page and Screen is a book of poetry that explores the place of books as objects in an era of increasingly screen-based reading. Its pages contain no text, only black and white geometric shapes and directions to visit betweenpageandscreen.com. At the site, the reader confronts her mirror image, thanks to a webcam, and when the book is opened, the text springs to life, appearing to leap off the page. These poems, a series of letters between P and S, two lovers struggling to define their relationship, draw on the etymologies of page and screen to explore their intersections and divergences. The words do not exist on either platform, but in the augmented space between them opened up by the reader.
So now to wrap up this video, I'm back on both microphones. The SM7b is still going through the Cloudlifter, and the Podmic is going through the K-Tek CL1 mic booster. I have the SM7b's gain set to 40 and the Podmic's gain set to 34. So the difference there is not only the Podmic being slightly more sensitive than the SM7b, but the K-Tek CL1 actually provides quite a bit more gain than the Cloudlifter CL1. Now to answer the question that we started off the video, is the Podmic actually any good for $100? And I think the short answer to that, or very simply, yeah, it's a decent microphone for $100. Of course, there is a huge difference, in my opinion anyway, between the quality of the sound between the SM7b and the Podmic. Of course, they're different sounding, but I do think that the SM7b is objectively better than the Podmic. The SM7b also has a couple of different switches that you can change the frequency response. I've had it in flat this entire time. There's a high pass filter, or otherwise known as a low cut filter, which will reduce the low frequencies. It'll just kind of roll those off, so it'll cut out some of that bass. And there's also a presence boost switch, which will punch up some of the mid to high frequencies. So it's very adaptable right in the microphone. So if you want to play with that, you can get a different sound right from the microphone as opposed to having to do it all in EQ in post-production. And as far as just the raw sound quality or the differences between these two microphones, the Podmic, as I've mentioned before in different videos, is very much boosted and sculpted in a way for this particular use case or the spoken word. So you'll see kind of a low-end boost, a presence boost in the mid frequencies, and then a high-end boost. Whereas the frequency response of the SM7b is much flatter, and then it does have these kind of weird bumps and stuff towards like really high frequencies, almost like the air frequencies that aren't probably that important for spoken word. They might be more important for recording guitars or maybe recording singing vocals. But for this use case, they're probably not even that apparent anyway. So the bottom line is that the frequency response of the SM7b is much flatter. So that gives you, it might not be something that is that exciting just right out of the microphone, and it might require some EQing in order to get it to sound how you want it. Whereas this one, it's like already built into the microphone, which could be good and bad. It might sound better right out of the microphone, and maybe it doesn't require a lot of EQ. But for me, it's like if it doesn't work for your voice, you're kind of stuck with it, and then you're stuck trying to pull things out as opposed to kind of having a blank canvas with the SM7b. Even though this does have kind of a low-end boost and then a mid boost, it just sounds a little bit sharper and shriller, more shrill than the SM7b. It's hard to describe the sound of the SM7b. It just has a way of just kind of taking out a lot of the harshness of your voice and just kind of sanding things down, if that makes any sense, or rounding them off in a way. It just has a very buttery smooth sound to it, which is why I think people love it so much for this application. All that said, my preference, and of course, I mean, the price difference, the difference in price is there for a reason. I do think that the SM7b is objectively better than the Podmic, and for everything that I do, I'm going to choose this one, unless there's just a reason, just for fun, to pull out this one, just because I like the way it looks on camera is really cool. This one is also ubiquitous, and there is something to be said for having something that not everybody else has. You might not give a shit. You might just want the best sounding mic. And the best sounding mic is the SM7b. You can definitely get a really great sound from the Podmic for a lot less money, and there's nothing wrong with that. Well, I hope that was helpful. I hope you got something out of that that was valuable in some way. Again, let me know in the comments what you thought about the microphones. If you thought one was better than the other, they both sucked, or they're both just fine, whatever the case is, or any other questions or comments you might have. And as always, I appreciate you watching this video, and maybe I'll see you in another one.